Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. In this episode, we talk about 12 out of the 17 Congress MLAs in Meghalaya leaving the party and joining Mamata Banerjee's TMC. We also take a quick look at India's new COVID restrictions for international travelers. But first, we talk about the National Family Health Survey. On Tuesday, the findings of the country's biggest health survey were released. The survey revealed important information about India's total fertility rate and the levels of nutrition present in the population. In the first segment, Conan Sheriff, who reports on health for the Indian Express, joins us to talk about it. Conan, before we talk about its results, could you first talk a bit about the significance of the National Family Health Survey?
So the National Family Health Survey is conducted by the Health Ministry. So we have so far conducted 5 rounds of the National Family Health Survey. The last round was in 2015-16. This time it was conducted in 2019 and 2021. This time we had 2 rounds, in fact, because the first round, there were almost 22 states and UTs that conducted. Because of the second wave, some states couldn't conduct it. So it was conducted in 2019 December. And yesterday, the data which came out was the total data as well as the second round, some of this 11 to 12 states and UTs that couldn't submit their data in the first phase. So why is it important? Basically, it gives us information about 3 main things. First is about population numbers. Second, of course, about nutrition and children. And third, about marriage, fertility, family planning. So all of these things are captured here. This time, for the first time, there was also data on the non-communicable diseases, on diabetes, hypertension. So this was captured for the first time in the National Family Health Survey. Why is it important? Because of the fact that this data is actually discussed with the states to have specific policy interventions in different states and to understand how to achieve sustainable development goals of the United Nations. So that is why it is actually conducted. And it is one of the largest survey in the world. And in the 5th round of NFHS, there were almost 6 lakh households that were surveyed. Significantly, majority of the people who were surveyed were women. So it is a very robust data. Almost 7 lakh women were surveyed in this whole exercise. So it is a very significant exercise.
Okay, so like you said, there are many things that the survey highlights. In this segment, of course, we are going to be focusing on 3 things: the total fertility rate, the prevalence of anemia, and what the survey tells us about other nutrition metrics. So let's start with the total fertility rate first. For those who don't know, the total fertility rate is the average number of children per woman. And this, the survey says, has further declined from 2.2 to 2.0 at the all India level. 2.2 was reported back in 2015-2016, and now it's 2.0. So Conan, could you talk about what experts say this means for the country?
Yeah. So the total fertility rate simply means children per woman. And the desired number is 2.1, which we call as the replacement fertility. Now, that was the desired number that the policymakers were aiming at. But what has happened is that we have actually fallen below even the 2.1 mark, which is 2. So the United Nations says that countries who are reporting lower than 2.1, it's an indication that a generation is not producing enough children to replace itself, eventually leading out to reduction in population. So effectively, you will see the impact of this maybe in the next 2 to 3 decades. Because in generic terms, we are saying that the population is stabilizing. So this number signifies that one couple have 2 children. So they will replace them in the next generation in terms of giving birth to another generation. So in that sense, there is virtually a 0 growth rate.
2 parents are replacing 2 children, basically.
2 children who will, after a few decades, will become parents again. So you have that lag. And because of that, you won't have this population explosion that we were talking about. So effectively, it is a 0 growth rate,
So all the anxiety over India's population being drastically increasing over the years, that notion we can get rid of?
So this number doesn't mean that we would not be the most populous country in the world. In fact, be the most populous country in the world. But instead of what we were thinking that it'll happen in the next few years, that won't happen. Like we were thinking that it could happen maybe in 2028 or 2026. That wouldn't happen. We will take more number of years to reach that number, the largest population. So is it significant because of three reasons? First, it is significant because we cannot no more say that population numbers are an impediment for development, because you have stabilized population, then you can actually plan well according to the local resources. The second thing is that this means that there is also a stability in human resource, that we will have a demographic dividend. But of course, you can reap the demographic dividend only if you have quality education with skills and, of course, good public health facilities, which is what we saw with China. China had a policy of one child, then they had a population stabilization. They reaped the benefits, which they called the demographic dividend. And then, it was also intertwined with skills. And that's why it became one of the biggest manufacturing hub of the world. So that's the second thing. And third thing, of course, because we are talking about so much of strain on our natural resources because the population, we keep talking. Now we need to understand that since the population has stabilized, so it is now imperative for all the policymakers at state level, local level, as well as national level, to look at the environmental aspect, because there is a huge crisis happening on that front. So this is what we're talking about. These numbers are very significant in multiple ways, but also we need to flag that there are at least two big states who are above this level, which is UP, which is at 2.4, and Bihar, which is at 3. So these states need to actually lower their total fertility rate, because these are states with really big numbers. So absolute numbers are very high. So unless these states do not achieve the TFR of 2, which India has achieved, then it would be really sort of a futile exercise to say that our population is stabilizing.
And Conan, do we know why the total fertility rate has gone down?
So it is very simple. It's very straightforward. It indicates better knowledge and use of family planning that has been happening over the years. So that is what it is. There is also a very significant rise in use of contraception. So that is also a big takeaway from this thing. And also, there is late entry into marriages. That is also being seen in urban areas. You're not seeing people who are getting married at 20, 21, 22. That kind of thing is not happening. In fact, the detailed data will come later in the maybe December, where we are seeing that actually after the marriage, you're starting a family even 3-4 years later in some urban cities. That is the kind of average we're looking at. So it indicates better knowledge and use of family planning. And of course, one of the significant, we have seen a very significant rise in the contraception. So it is because of that.
Okay, so apart from the total fertility rate, the other thing that the survey sheds light on is the prevalence of anemia in the country, which is basically the condition in which one has lower than normal number of red blood cells. And a large number of women and children in the country have suffered from anemia, but the survey shows that the situation has actually become worse over the past few years. So, what exactly does the survey tell us about this particular problem?
So anemia is one of the key metrics to sort of look at undernutrition or malnutrition in a population. What is alarming in this is the fact that anemia is a concern, but it is a concern across all the age groups. So we are, firstly, the highest is in children who are under 4 years. So 67% of India's population in this age group is anemic, and it is almost 68% in the rural areas. And this was just 58% in the previous survey. So you're seeing a 10 percentage point increase in children who are under 4 who are anemic. The second is we are seeing 52% of pregnant women between 15 and 49 who are anemic. Even who are non-pregnant, also we are seeing 57 to 58% who are anemic. The other big takeaway is that although men are significantly low, but compared to the previous survey, again, men also have become more anemic. 25% of men are anemic, but in the last survey, it was just around 20%. So across all age groups, we are seeing anemia as a concern. So it sort of red flags into what is going wrong, because health ministry has a flagship program on anemia. You talk about the folic acid, there are pills that are given, and of course also you have this new program called the Poshan Abhiyan, where the Women and Child Development with the Health Ministry sort of looks issue of anemia. So it is a big issue right now in India. There are some states where it's really, really high. In Madhya Pradesh is as high as 73%, Punjab it is 70%, Rajasthan is 72%. And the big problem is the good states, which we call as good states on public health, like Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu is now showing 57.4% of the population anemic.
Yeah, and the survey also talks about other metrics like stunting and wasting. And just for our listeners, in terms of malnutrition, stunting is defined as low height for age, and wasting means having low weight for one's height. So, Conan, what do we learn about these two metrics from the survey?
So there has been a small drop in children who are stunted from 38% to 35%. Similarly, we have also seen a small dip in children who are wasted. But again, if you're saying that 35% of the children under 5 are stunted in the country, it's a big cause of concern. And in rural India, it's almost 37%. So it's still a big concern. So the nutritional status among children is again really, really is something to worry about.
Okay, so right now, obviously, it's too soon to say, but are these nutrition levels also connected to the rise in unemployment rates and the economy worsening over the past few years?
Yeah, so it is. I mean, these are all linked to social economic conditions, but there might be multiple reasons for it. We can't just say one thing because anemia, nutrition, all of them are part of also schemes of the government. So it shouldn't be just related to that, but something is not like right in terms of implementation of these programs. Maybe look at fortification of diet related to anemia, iron basically. So I think that would be the direction that the government would go in. I mean, even the states which were doing well have stopped doing well on this metric. So still, we don't have an actual sort of a critical analysis of what is happening on this front. There could be multiple factors why this is happening.
Okay, so we talked about nutrition and we talked about the total fertility rate. Is there any other thing that stands out in this survey as of now?
Yeah, something which is positive from this survey is the fact that 41% of the households, at least one member is covered under a health insurance, which is a rise from 28.7 in the last round. So it's a significant increase. Why is it significant? Because it indicates more social security. It indicates a larger reach and greater acceptance of health insurance in India. We know that health insurance prevents out of pocket expenditure. We saw that happening in COVID. So this is a very significant number. Also, we need to understand that the flagship Ayushman Bharat was not fully rolled out during the period which this survey was conducted. So this number does not really reflect the Ayushman Bharat figures. So in that backdrop, 41% of households, at least one member of this household having a health insurance is a good indication of social security in the population.
And next, we talk about Meghalaya. Right now in Meghalaya, the main opposition in the state is the Congress Party. And earlier this week, it experienced a major setback. This is because 12 out of 17 of its MLAs left the party and joined Mamta Banerjee's Trinamool Congress, that is the TMC. This is particularly significant considering how aggressively TMC has been looking to expand its base beyond West Bengal, where it's traditionally from. In this segment, Indian Express's Saurav Roy Burman talks about this development. Saurav, so do we know what led to the 12 Congress MLAs joining the TMC?
So it all started right after the 2018 assembly polls in Meghalaya, where the Congress had emerged as the single largest party with 21 seats in the 60-member state assembly. But it could not form the government. So the National People's Party, which is the incumbent ruling party in the state, it had got 18 seats and the BJP had 2 seats. But eventually it managed to stitch together a coalition, which is now ruling the state. And later in the 2019 Lok Sabha polls, Congress had fielded its stalwarts Mukul Sangma and Vincent Pala as candidates in the 2 Lok Sabha seats. So Pala managed to win his seat, but Sangma lost. Sangma is a 2-time chief minister, but eventually the two fell out and it resulted in factionalism, intense infighting in the state unit. And, to make things worse, in August this year, Pala was made the state Congress chief, which Sangma claims it was done without even consulting him. And then the leadership called both the leaders to Delhi and they tried to placate, but it did not yield and there was no solution in sight. So Meghalaya also had by-polls to 3 seats in last month. So before the by-polls, the state unit managed to put up a united face, but the Congress managed to draw a blank in the elections. So eventually, late Wednesday night, news came that 12 Congress MLAs led by Mukul Sangma, they have switched over to the TMC. So now on Thursday, they also made a joint appearance before the media during a press conference, which was primarily addressed by Sangma.
And what are the kind of things he said during this press conference?
I think he laid major emphasis on the fact that the decision was collective and it was a conscious decision which came after long deliberations. And he attributed the decision to the Indian National Congress's failure to respond to the call of duty, as he described it, as the largest player in the opposition in Meghalaya as well as in the country. And in Trinamool Congress, he says he sees a strong pan-India alternative to replace the Congress and to fill the void created by the Congress's retreat.
And what kind of reaction did we see from the Congress members regarding this development?
Congress in Meghalaya, so Vincent Pala had a very brief reaction and he told the media that the party will fight back very strongly. And in Delhi, I think Congress had a press conference at the All India Congress headquarters, so where one of their spokespersons actually termed TMC as the BJP's proxy.
So this move appears to be part of TMC's larger plan to expand its base nationally. And in that regard, could you talk about, the other attempts that we have seen by the party lately?
So the TMC has been trying to expand its national footprint very aggressively. Ever since it came to power, it returned to power in May in Bengal. And its plans are gradually unfolding. And so far, it has announced that it will be fighting the next assembly polls in Tripura, in Goa. It has inducted a Congress leader in Uttar Pradesh. It also plans to expand in Bihar, for which it has inducted former Congress leader Kirti Azad and former JDU MP Pawan Verma. So it has also managed to induct Ashok Tawar, who is the former Haryana Congress president. He was considered a very close aide of Rahul Gandhi at one point. And in all this, the TMC is also being assisted by poll strategist Prashant Kishore, who's playing a very crucial role. And this is something which also figured in Mukul Sangma's press conference today. He actually revealed that he had multiple meetings with Kishore before he made up his mind.
Also, earlier there was this perception that maybe the TMC will form an alliance with the Congress party to fight the BJP. But with these developments, has that completely changed?
See, in July, when Mamata Banerjee had visited Delhi after winning the Bengal elections, she had meetings with Sonia Gandhi, where Rahul Gandhi was also present. She had also met Congress leaders Anand Sharma, Kamal Nath, Abhishek Manu Singhvi. After meetings, she spoke about the need for opposition unity to defeat the BJP. But during her latest trip, she did not have any meeting with any Congress leader. And to understand the difference, I think we need to look at the events that transpired over the last 4 months between her July trip and her latest trip. And starting from Prashant Kishore's meetings with the Gandhis, with a roadmap for the Congress's future, to their eventual fallout. Since then, Kishore has been driving the Trinamool's expansion plans, be it in Goa or, say, Tripura. And over the last few months and weeks, TMC has also inducted a large number of Congress leaders. And the latest being the switchover in Meghalaya, which is something we're already discussing. And the two parties are now publicly criticizing each other. TMC is now claiming that it had pitched for unity, but it cannot wait indefinitely for the Congress to respond. So undoubtedly, there has been a radical shift in the overall situation.
And I'm guessing after its landslide win in the assembly elections, the party must have gained confidence that they don't need the Congress to expand its base nationally.
Yeah, that it has already started in states where, it can sense an opportunity. It is making aggressive moves where it senses that the Congress is losing ground. So it is trying to emerge as the principal opposition, as the major player to fight the BJP. But the Mamata Banerjee has also made it very clear that TMC will not contest in every state. And she does not want to weaken the fight of the quote-unquote regional parties against the BJP. So wherever possible and wherever she is needed, she is ready to go and campaign.
And in the end, we talk about India's new travel restrictions. Yesterday, the Health Ministry issued a direction to all states that international travelers coming from and transiting through Botswana, South Africa, and Hong Kong must be subjected to rigorous screening and testing. This is because multiple cases of the B11529 COVID-19 variant have been found reported in these countries. The Health Secretary Rajesh Bhushan said that the B11529 variant is reported to have a significantly higher number of mutations and thus has serious public health implications for India in the view of the recently relaxed visa restrictions and opening up of international travel. As part of these restrictions, states will now have to send the samples of travelers turning positive to designated labs of INSACOG that track and monitor the emergence and transmission of COVID-19 variants of concerns and variants of interest in India. Also, state surveillance officers will have to coordinate with the INSACOG labs and undertake the test, track, treat method to prevent the spread of the variant and formation of clusters of cases. You were listening to 3 Things by The Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.